Initially, I wasn't sure where the friend who wasn't there was going, but where it ended up, I thought was lovely, and I want to discuss that, so I'll give a spoiler warning in a little bit to discuss that in more detail. But this is the first segment of the first episode of the 18th season of Arthur. Not many left to go now, unfortunately. And in this one, Muffy sees DW talking to, well, what she thinks is nobody, but obviously it's Nadine. And they start to talk about Arthur and Francine, start to talk about their imaginary friends. And Muffy's a bit confused because she can't remember ever having an imaginary friend. And she talks to Bailey about this. And Bailey points out that he believes she had an imaginary friend when she was about 3 years old. She can't remember him or her or it, but Bailey says there might be some drawings that you did of this imaginary friend down in the basement. So Muffy goes down to the basement to try and find this imaginary friend. And honestly, the scenes in the basement I didn't love because it kind of enters an imaginary world, if you like, and the whole thing with like the Wizard of Oz aspect to it, those characters, why were they there? It didn't make a lot of sense. They were just, once it entered the imaginary world in the basement, I just thought it was a little bit peculiar and it didn't make that much sense to me. And one could argue the imagination doesn't need to, but what I mean is, why would those things be triggered in Muffy's memory? With a spoiler, I'll discuss that in more details in a moment. But there were definitely things that didn't make sense. But ultimately, the direction it took and the ultimate message I thought was brilliant. So it's not the best episode, it's not perfect. There's certainly room for improvement, but I enjoyed it. I liked the concept. It's definitely one that I had some fun watching, and I was, ultimately keen to find out what Muffy's imaginary friend was like. So, spoilers from now. I will discuss what the message is and also what I meant by the imaginary world. So, the thing that didn't make any sense to me was the Wizard of Oz characters. From what I can see, when Muffy entered that imaginary world, it was memories that were being triggered by things that she was looking at in the box in the basement. And those, physical representations, pictures, memorabilia, which are, I don't think memorabilia is the right word, but little memories from her childhood were triggering these actual memories. So why would DW be there as Dorothy? Like, that just didn't make any sense to me at all. And I felt like it kind of ruined an otherwise really kind of beautiful and somewhat sentimental narrative. So it wasn't perfect. But the main message, the fact that once Muffy got a little bit older, she started to get a lot more toys, things that would dictate her play. Of course, you can have toys and be imaginative, but because she had more than everybody else, it meant that the things around her dictated her play. So much more than, obviously, a child who's got no toys only has their imagination. A child who only has some toys has to rely on their imagination a little bit more. And Muffy's world has been full of toys and material objects and gadgets and gizmos and everything that causes a distraction. And it basically says if you have too much, your imagination's not going to be that strong because you're not going to have a need for it. And I thought that was a pretty powerful message. So I kind of forgive the weird imagination scenes in the basement. But also, the imaginary friend itself, how adorable. I rather enjoyed that aspect. So yeah, it's a good episode. Not perfect. Definitely needed a bit of a tidy up. But I enjoyed it, and the ultimate message was pretty beautiful.